channels available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.
Good evening, Exeter. Good evening to my colleagues on the board, respective town staff, members of the public here this evening, those watching at home, and welcome to the September 27, 2021 Town of Exeter Select Board meeting. I'd like to start by introducing the board. To my right is Select Woman Lovey Roundtree-Olaf. Good evening.
Good evening.
And to my left, our clerk, Select Woman Julie Gilman.
Good evening.
Good evening. Selectman Darrell Brown. Good evening.
Good evening.
Our town manager all the way to the left, Mr. Rustine.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Nico Papakostendis. This evening, Selectwoman Molly Cowan had a prior commitment, so it'll just be the four of us. And the first order of business is public comment, and this is an opportunity for the public to weigh in on anything they'd like to talk with the board about. However, if your comment is relative to anything on the agenda, we ask that you wait until that agenda item comes up. So I'll pause for a moment. And seeing no members of the public for comment, we'll move on to proclamations and recognitions. And at this time, I would ask our clerk, Selectwoman Gilman, to read the Town of Exeter proclamation, the Purple Heart. Selectwoman Gilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a proclamation in the year of our Lord 2021 for the Military Order of the Purple Heart. Whereas the town of Exeter have great admiration and utmost gratitude for all citizens of our community who have unselfishly served in the armed forces, which have been vital in maintaining the freedom and way of life enjoyed by our citizens. And whereas citizens of our community have been wounded in action or killed in action while serving in the armed forces and have been posthumously awarded the Purple Heart for their ultimate sacrifice. And whereas the Purple Heart is the oldest American military decoration and was created as a badge of military merit, made of purple cloth in the shape of a heart with the word merit sewn upon it on August 7th, 1782 in Newburgh, New York, by General Washington. And whereas the heritage it represents is sacred to those who know the price paid to wear the Purple Heart. And whereas August 7th is the nationally recognized as Purple Heart Day. Now, therefore, we, the Select Board of the Town of Exeter, will recognize August 7th annually as Purple Heart Day and encourage citizens and organizations of Exeter to display the American flag as well as other public expressions of recognition of our Purple Heart recipients, dated this 27th day of September 2021.
Terrific. Thank you, Selectwoman Gilman. Moving on, we have two sets of minutes to approve, the first of which was the regular meeting select board minutes of August 23rd, 2021. At this time, I would ask the board if there are any amendments to the minutes or revisions. Okay, then seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the Exeter Select Board regular meeting minutes of August 23rd, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. 3-0, I'm sorry. Oh, you were...
I was not there.
You were abstained. This motion passes 3-0, one abstention. The next minutes we have before us are from the regular meeting of September 13th, 2021. I would ask the board at this time if there are any amendments or revisions to those minutes. Okay, seeing none, I would seek a motion to approve the Exeter Select Board regular meeting minutes of September 13th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
One abstention.
One abstention. Motion passes 3-0, one abstention. Thank you. We do not have any appointments this evening, so we can jump right into our discussion items. And the first discussion item is the Bowerland donation. This will be the second public hearing with respect to this, so I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing at this time.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Public hearing is open. This is an opportunity for anybody in the public to comment or discuss the land donation. Seeing no members of the public, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Public hearing is closed. Mr. Dean, I believe we have a timeline of 7 days. We'll meet again next Monday, and at that time, we could entertain a motion to accept the donation.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving along. We have a conservation deed, the Mendes Trust. Mr. Dean, do we have staff, any member of staff that is here to discuss this?
Yes, I know Kristen Murphy, our natural resources planner, is here tonight, and she did report to me that the Conservation Commission has reviewed this deed as well as herself, and that it's in a form to be accepted.
Okay. And specifically, this is a warranty deed to convey approximately 31 acres of land to the town of Exeter.
Correct.
Okay. Do we have a representative from the Mendes Trust that wishes to address the board?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Justin Passe. I'm a lawyer at DTC Lawyers here in Exeter. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant before the planning board, Brian Grisette and his wife Adela. Certainly here to answer any questions, any overview that the board deems appropriate, but certainly this conservation deed was subject to sort of review and scrutiny at the planning board level, subject again to review and scrutiny at the Conservation Commission level, which unanimously approved and recommended acceptance by the town. It's a condition of approval from the planning board. We feel like it's in a ripe stage. I understand it received legal review as well. So happy to answer any questions, but hoping that the board recommends acceptance of the deed tonight.
Terrific, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions of Attorney Passe from the board?
No, I've seen this at the Conservation Commission, so I'm pretty intimate with it.
Okay.
But just so people understand that it's contiguous with the Brickyard Pond ball field. So that there can be access.
Any other questions or comments? Then at this time, I would entertain a motion from the board to accept the conservation warranty deed of I would entertain a motion from the board to accept the proposed warranty deed, which would convey approximately 31 acres of land to the town, the Mendes Revocable Real Estate Trust.
So moved.
Second.
Should we include the tax map numbers?
Yep. Find those.
If I can find them.
Mr. Chairman, it's tax map 81, lot 53.
There you go.
I'm sorry, the lot again, please.
53.
8153. Mr. Chair, I amend my motion to include tax map reference 8153.
Lot 53. So motion and a second, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? The motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. Hope the townspeople enjoy it.
Thank you, Mr. Grisette.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the first of three readings of the proposed tree ordinance. Madam Clerk.
Are you kidding me?
You've got a lot.
We have to figure out which chapter this is going to be in. I'll introduce it. I'm not going to go through all the details of it. There's a subcommittee of the Conservation Commission. It's the Tree Committee, which is established after Exeter was named a Tree City USA, and it was formed in order to maintain that distinction. And throughout their work, as well as having trees already planted, they came up with a tree ordinance that would go in our town ordinances along with street parking and noise and et cetera. But this is pretty substantial, and they've worked on it for a long time, and it has to do with street trees, not personal trees, but trees in the public way. And it gives folks an opportunity, or tells them they have the right to have trees that might be in hazard or dying or cracking sidewalks, to bring it to the attention of our tree warden, who is at this time Jay Perkins. And then it sets out the guides for how it would be replaced. If somebody wants to take care of it themselves, they just have to ask the tree warden if it's okay. It talks about the limitations on what people can do. No harming the trees, don't build a swing in it, tree house, etc. But then I really like, there's quite extensive illustrations of how to best plant a tree and take care of it, and an extensive list of forbidden plants that the state no longer allows to be sold and planted. And then an extensive list of what trees are encouraged.
Okay.
So,
I think we have a member of the tree committee here this evening. Good evening, Eileen.
Eileen Flockhart, 7 Dax Court. Just to give you a little bit of background for those of you who may not be aware of it, the tree committee formed in 2019, and that was the first year that we were able to get Tree City USA established, even though we kind of slid under the wire. And the last 2 years, 2019 and 2020, we've been able to continue that status. And we had focused, on establishing the committee. We've managed to get some incredible volunteers, arborists and folks from UNH, and everybody who is really interested in doing it right and trying to find out, all right, what could we manage? What piece of the pie could we really tackle and do well? And the more we looked at Tree City USA's needs in the application, the more we realized we didn't really have a tree ordinance. We really didn't have what was needed. So we decided that that's really what we needed to tackle. And so between regular committee meetings and subcommittees, we had a lot of people doing a ton of work. And we looked everywhere. We had websites from tree committees all over the country, and right here in town, our arborists, and Jay was a huge help. And what's been nice is that not only we have Jay working, he's been on the committee since day one, but we have Greg Beeson and, folks in town, and Kristen and everybody's been we've coordinated all of that. So when we said, okay, well, we'd like to plant some more trees this year, Greg says, well, I've got some trees I need to plant at Gilman Park. Why don't we do that? So 7 trees went in Gilman Park this year, and that was our Arbor Day, and we did a tree at Lincoln Street in the middle of the pandemic, and that was Arbor Day. And we've planted 3 more trees at Park Street Common, and we've tuned up an elm tree that was dying over by our Tree City USA flagpole. And so a bunch of things have sort of all kind of come together, and the tree ordinance is really the reason we're here tonight, is to get something with good information, something with teeth in it, that makes what we say about town and street trees and what we say about the trees in our parks really mean something, and that the value of trees in all those spaces, it's not just because we love trees and they're nice shade. We're talking climate issues, we're talking water runoff, we're talking a million different things. That's the reason we want to do this. And so once we kind of get past having a decent tree ordinance in the works, then we got a million ideas that we want to take off and run with after that. But so this is our first shot at it, and Kristen's going to go over a little bit more. She worked really hard on this with Gwen English and a few other folks, and so she's got the big picture better than the nuts and bolts that I have. So
Thank you, Eileen.
So I thought it might be helpful to step through at least some key points in this ordinance. And huge thanks to Eileen. It is quite an extensive group of volunteers on this. There are 4 different arborists that have participated, including an arborist from Unitil. And the beauty of that is Jay has worked with Unitil regularly to manage the storm hardening. And so we really have both perspectives in the room when we were crafting this. We also have the Rockingham County Forester and others. So, and then as well as staff present, Greg Beeson has been there, Jay Perkins has been there from the start, and I've been there. So, so I thought jurisdiction, Julie had mentioned it. So this is all streets, highways, parks. Currently it says cemeteries, other grounds owned by the town, including public easements along public roads and property line. And so, so we had quite a bit of discussion about that. The public doesn't always know where the public right-of-way is, and so, so Jay offered to be that resource. He does that today, but it really kind of solidified his role in determining that. So Dave did bring up cemeteries. He expressed a concern with something like Winter Street, for example. So the trees that are out there are causing damage to the headstones. And I didn't get a chance to bring that up at the committee at the last meeting, but I think that's something that we could talk about eliminating if the group, if you all support that. So then on page 4, it talks about the tree warden and really kind of refines and solidifies his responsibility, as well as on page 5, the responsibility of the tree committee. But the crux of this is really that the majority of trees, all of the trees in town cannot be trimmed or treated, cut down, or planted without permission from the tree warden. And when trees that are present are greater than 20 dBH, so it's a pretty big tree, diameter at breast height, that would invoke consultation of the tree committee. So that's kind of a unique step that's not quite as extreme as other communities, such as Portsmouth, where they have to meet on every action on a street tree, but it offers some sort of threshold level. So the committee consultation doesn't become overburdensome, but is still consulted during significant tree removals or tree management. Let's see. The other thing that this creates that's kind of exciting on page 6, an opportunity and kind of refines the sponsorship of public trees. So if you have a town right-of-way in front of your house and you really want a tree there, through consultation with Jay Perkins, you can select from a list of trees, and then as long as you commit to care and water for that tree, Public Works would plant it. So I think that's exciting and could really, you know, if you look at the old town reports, the Conservation Commission was instrumental in planting a lot of the street trees in the 70s and even into the 80s. And so this really has the potential, I think, over the long term to kind of change our streetscape. Let's see. It does talk about, it sets up a protocol if a tree is removed without that permission. It identifies that as an unlawful act, basically, and requires payment of a penalty fee not to exceed $300, or replanting, which might include, that's on page 6, the unlawful, damaged, or destroyed trees. It would require them to remove and dispose the removed tree. So if they damaged it by, I don't know, topping a tree or something like that, and it won't survive, they'd need to remove the tree, including the stump, any landscape repairs, and provide a 3-year guarantee of success. And then the next page under penalties talks about a fine not to exceed $300. But generally, the goal is to encourage people to consult the tree warden before they do anything to the trees. But if there is some intentional act, there is some teeth, as you had mentioned, Eileen. And then the other thing, the last thing I just want to mention, so the approved list of trees and shrubs, We created through this a matrix, so we have a spreadsheet that's bigger than this list. So if someone's looking for a street tree that in an area that gets salted, or if someone's looking for a larger tree in a park setting, we can use that spreadsheet to find the right type of tree for the setting, which is great. But we do have an approved list of trees and shrubs that require consideration of planting of native first and justification for choosing a non-native. So that's it in a nutshell. And so where
The donation trees?
Oh, yeah, and that's right. I missed the highlighting that. The other part of this is the Memorial Tree Foundation. So Greg Bison, through his avenues, I don't understand Greg's budget, and I don't have the right terminology, but has the ability to establish a memorial tree fund similar to the memorial park benches. And so people can donate to the Memorial Tree Fund and then plant memorial trees in town. So, but that will be managed by Greg. So that's it. I think we're here for questions from you. If you have any thoughts, concerns, or edits to this, it still needs legal counsel review, and so we wanted to be sure, because it is a very unique animal in town, we haven't had this yet, we wanted to be sure we had feedback from you, at least on the concept and the process of having a volunteer board play a role in making recommendations to the tree warden.
So Kristen, where this is the first public reading,
Yep.
We'll have 3 next Monday, and then the 18th. Will you have an opinion back from council by then?
Yeah, if you are okay with this concept and content, I can certainly reach out to.
Well, we can
Laura.
discuss it. One of the things I wanted to ask, though, and I think, by the way, this is marvelous, and the committee put a lot of work into this. This is wonderful, and I'm excited by this. On the penalty section, I know, and I'm not comparing the two, but I know that when we passed the mask ordinance a year ago, one of the things as a board, I think collectively, was more of an educational aspect more than trying to find people or to police it. And I'm assuming that that's the same here, is that, you know, obviously you've got to put some teeth in it, but you're not really looking to find people. You're looking to just educate them and take responsibility and then follow through. But if that were to remain in there with the fine of $300, not to exceed the $300, who, and then this, you may not know the answer, Mr. Dean, this might have to come to you, but who would be enforcing that?
Normally, the enforcement agent on our town ordinances is the police department. So I think that's something we'd need to check with legal counsel as far as would there be another enforcement authority. I'm not sure that, well, I know in our town ordinances, we don't have any other enforcement authority, so we generally enforce through the police department. So we'd have to check on that.
Yeah, that's really the only thing that concerned me, was that aspect of it. And again, I know we have to have some teeth in this to make it work, but more, if we make it more on an educational side, or just, you know, accepting responsibility, or, you know, any other ideas you may have. But I'm not sure the police would be excited about having to enforce that.
Right. The other enforcement authorities we do have in the town are the code enforcement officer, obviously has some enforcement authority, but I think we'd need to check on that if we got into a situation of enforcement, how we would literally go about it. Would we take a person to court who didn't pay the fine or do something satisfactorily in accordance with the ordinance?
And I don't think that's what your goal is here.
No, and I mean, I think conceptually I would envision it similar to littering. You know, you would manage it similarly. You're not going to go out there and find everyone who drops a gun wrapper, but you're going to use that to, you know, discourage that from happening.
And then my last question, Kristen, the funding part. Obviously, I understand the committee may need funds. Do you have any idea of what, would you be looking for a line item in the budget, or?
So, no, not this year. We wrote it in support of, Jay Perkins is really working toward having some support from an on-staff arborist. And so this committee is willing to stand up to support that goal, but we wouldn't have a separate line item for this committee.
Great. Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf, any questions or comments? No? Selectwoman Gilman?
No, I think everyone should take a look at it. It's posted on our website now in our packet and on the Conservation Commission page.
It can be, yeah.
Well, either way, you should take a look at it because it's quite informative about the health of our trees, and you might start looking and seeing, are they healthy or not? Because you get the information. It's really nice.
Thank you. Selectman Brown?
Just a typo or grammatical question. Is it supposed to read the purpose of this chapter or the purpose of this ordinance? There's a couple times where it's referred to as chapter instead of...
I believe our town ordinances are broken into, are they into chapters?
Okay. So
I don't
keep
know,
those.
but that, thank you.
The answer is
I
yes on that.
Okay.
They're codified in chapters, and that's probably why
Okay.
it reads that way.
Got it. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's a good point, though, by Selectman Brown to bring that up, because sometimes that isn't the case, and then the wording would have been ordinance.
Thank you. Any other members of the public or staff wish to comment? Hi, Dave.
Hello. I just want to follow up with Kristen said, because I was talking to her and having done a lot of work at Winter Cemetery and took down 26 trees there, and they would have all been deemed significant because they were all over 20 inches. But those trees at the Winter Street Cemetery were responsible for all the damage of the headstones and basically limbs falling off and turning some of them into rubble that would take a lot to repair, and also growing up and through grave sites. So I had asked Kristen if they'd consider, and I would ask you too, if you could consider it to exempt cemeteries. They exempt the conservation land, and I would think it would make sense to exempt cemeteries. I mean, I know it's just a step and we go and get the approval, but it just didn't, it didn't seem warranted in cemeteries, because that's why you'd remove a tree. I wouldn't remove a tree unless it was posing a hazard to the grave sites.
Okay. And Dave, I should know the answer to this, but is the definition of significant trees consistent with how the planning board defines significant trees, or does that matter?
Significant trees, I just read it once, the tree ordinance over, is in the planning board, it's 20-inch DBH.
That's what it is, okay.
Okay, so that's the same.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Comments from the board about the cemetery request?
I'm fine with it. In fact, I'm thrilled with it. But just so for clarification, the cemeteries that the town has control over are the old family lots that have been abandoned, like on High Street and up on Perkins Hill and a couple other places, on Winter Street Cemetery, the Gasworks Cemetery, but not the Exeter Cemetery, which is its own separate entity. So those are places that are open to the public, and you can only look at and take pictures of the monuments, but clearing the trees when necessary is an advantage to the preservation.
So we could specify public cemeteries, but that would be it.
Yeah.
If we did that.
And is the board comfortable with Kristen moving forward with legal counsel? Okay. Thank you, Kristen. Great. Thanks, Eileen. Okay. And the second and third readings will be on October 4th and the 18th, respectively. Next, we have Mr. Sharples to present the Public Safety Complex Analysis Contract. Good evening, Mr. Sharples.
Good evening again, thank you. Just going to go over the RFQ process we went through and where we are to date, but just a little history first. As you all know, the voters approved a warrant article in March earlier this year in 2021, Article 13 that read Public Safety Complex Alternative Analysis to see if the town will raise and appropriate through special warrant article the sum of $100,000 for the purpose of evaluating alternatives for a new public safety complex, this sum to come from general taxation. After the vote that was successful, and due to my experience with past, RFQ, RFP processes, I helped the chiefs get to this point. My involvement was, work with the Facilities Advisory Committee, finalize an RFQ, issue it, organize an interview panel, kind of go through the process that I've gone through with selecting consultants in the past. And I was happy to provide that help with them. So I worked with the Facilities Advisory Committee, or we worked with the Facilities Advisory Committee to finalize a scope of work for the analysis. And then once finalized, we issued the enclosed request for qualifications on May 10th, 2021, with a deadline for submittals on June 18th, 2021. So we gave them about 5 weeks to respond. We fortunately received a total of 15 responses to the RFQ. And I enclosed the response from LaValle Brensinger Architects, who was the selected consultant, I'll get into. We formed, from there, after we received the 15 proposals, we formed an interview selection committee that initially consisted of myself, Police Chief Poulin, Fire Chief Wilkin, Mark Layton from PA, but representing the Facilities Advisory Committee, and Mr. Dean, the town manager. The interview committee reviewed and ranked all the responses with a set criteria that we used. And we used that to choose 5 firms out of the 15 to interview. We held the interviews in early August, and Chris Weeks, the chair of the Facilities Advisory Committee, sat in for Mark Layton, who was unable to make the meetings, and we asked DPW to join us, and Paul Vlasich, the town engineer, attended the interviews along with myself, the town manager, and both the chiefs. Subsequently, the committee met and discussed the interviews on several occasions and selected LaValle Brensinger Architects to negotiate a final scope and fee for the project, because the RFQ process is a little different from the RFP process because you're requesting qualifications, and you choose the most qualified firm that you feel that you could work with the best and will do the best job for you, and then you negotiate a final scope and fee, and if you don't come to a mutual agreement, you move to the next selected thing, whereas in our request for proposal usually includes a cost proposal. So I negotiated, the town manager asked me to continue and negotiate and come up with a contract with LBA, LaValle Brensinger Architects, and I negotiated with Rob Robachek from LBA, who they initially proposed a fee of $94,000 plus up to $2,000 for reimbursable. The chiefs and I discussed this, and even though we had funding to cover this under the approved warrant article, we wanted some leeway in the event other tasks present themselves during the analysis, and I reached out to Bob at LBA, and after discussion, they agreed to keep the same scope of work with a fee of $78,800 plus reimbursables of up to $1,000 for a total project cost not to exceed $79,800. I would like to thank LBA for their willingness to revise the fee without reducing the scope. It is greatly appreciated when you go into negotiations like this and you try to, get your to a price point where you're willing to. A lot of times it results in a scope revision. So you revise the scope and maybe get less work for the less money. But I think their willingness to do this underscores their willingness to be a solid partner on the town on this project. And so I enclosed a contract, which has been reviewed by our legal counsel, and Exhibit A has been reviewed by myself and both chiefs, and we find it consistent with the scope as presented in the RFQ. Therefore, we collectively recommend the Select Board authorize you, that's what I was asking to Russ. Thus, we collectively recommend the Select Board authorize the town manager to execute any and all documents between the town and LBA to complete the public safety alternatives analysis. And I included a proposed motion at the end of the memo for you to use. And you'll note that I did add the authority to expend up to $100,000, which is a total amount approved by the voters, whereas the enclosed contract is not to exceed $79,800. Approval of the entire amount will allow us to engage LBA LBA for additional services if the need arises, and obviously within the total approved funding amount. The next step, which will be the chiefs now working with LBA to do the programming, and the initial step is the programming where they determine what the space needs of the departments are, and then a public input process. So from that, then kind of get to a sense of what the needs are, then you can move on to kind of site options and looking at potential site selections and the different alternatives. So it's a fluid process, and giving us the ability to, or giving the chiefs the ability to, ask for additional funding, to get this project done, I thought would be prudent at this time. Otherwise, we'd have to come back every time additional funding was spent, but it's all within the warrant article. So I believe this process went well. I'd like to thank the Facilities Advisory Committee and DPW and the town manager and the chiefs for, all putting the work in, and hopefully this is the start of a good, analysis to getting, to figuring out what to do with the public safety complex. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharples, and I would like to second acknowledging the committee, the chiefs, Mr. Dean, and DPW, but also you for your negotiating skills and negotiating a lower rate without giving up anything on the scope of it. So thank you for that. Any questions or comments from the board for Mr. Sharples?
Yeah, I had an overall question. So doing RFQs versus RFPs, in your history, where do you spend more money? What's the wiser approach?
I couldn't answer, what spends more money. I've never done the same controlled environment with an RFQ and an RFP and compared the two. The RFQ process, if you ever have any inkling or any idea that you could use federal funding down the road, it's good to use the RFQ, because usually through the TAP grant and a lot of grants I get, they require that process. So if you've selected someone not through that process and then you get funding tied to that project, then you're going to kind of got to go through the process again. If you can show them, hey, this is the process I went through, they can give you approval of the process, and you can get funding without having to do anything additional. So that's, I think, the one advantage I see over, I think they both have their place.
Okay, and is there any chance that the vetting that happens in the RFQ wouldn't be up to federal standards?
Oh, no. That's how I kind of learned this process, from doing a lot of federal grants and requirements and so forth. So I feel we did it. If we ever got funding down the road, I think we could definitely justify our selection of LBA.
Got it. Thanks.
Thank you, Selectman Brown. Any other, Mr. Dean?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to also thank Dave and the two chiefs. Dave, obviously, he did a great job with this process, and just wanted to offer my thanks in public while we're at a meeting.
Great, thank you. Thanks. Selectwoman Gilman, any questions?
No, this is all not new to me. I'm pleased with the selection of LBA. I'm familiar with some of their work. So I have confidence in contract looks good.
Good, okay.
Background looks good.
Okay. If there are no other questions or comments, I would entertain a motion to authorize the town manager to execute any documents, agreements, and take any and all such actions on behalf of the town to complete the Public Safety Complex Alternatives Analysis Project in accordance with Town Warrant Article 13, approved on March 10th, 2021. This authorization includes executing the attached contract with LaValle Brenzinger Architects PLLC for a total price not to exceed $79,800 and up to $21,020.
20. That was a mistake.
20,200?
Yes, thank you. I noticed that earlier.
And up to $20,200 for any additional work, for example, geotech, hazardous materials, survey, etc., up to a total not to exceed the $100,000 to complete the project as approved by the voters.
Second.
I need the motion.
Oh, is that so moved?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Thanks again, Dave. Thank you, Chief.
Chief can talk about his 2 new firefighters when we get to the budget.
Okay, moving on to our next discussion item. We will recall that the town voted in March 2021 to approve funding for construction administration, and inspection for the Salem Street Area Improvement Project, which was including water, sewer, drainage, roadway, and sidewalk construction on all or portions of Forest Street, Hale Street, Locust Street, Oak Street, Park Street, Salem Street, Wadley Street, Walnut Street, and Warren Street, on the total amount of $5,100,000. Since that passed on the warrant, Hoyle Tanner and Associates were the design engineers for the project. Attached is a contract for the construction administration and resident project representative services to facilitate the Salem Street Utility Improvement Project for $568,500. The contract will be split between the general fund, $100,000, water fund, $288,500, and the sewer fund, $188,000. The Department of Public Works recommends approving the contract and the RPR for the Salem Street Utility Project to Hoyle Tanner and Associates for $568,000. And I would open it up to the board for any comments or questions. Mr. Jean, will you be able to handle specific questions if we have any?
Just as a reminder that Hoyle Tanner were the design engineers for the project, so beyond that, I really didn't have anything to add to this. The total project is cited, the 5.1 million, so this is, I believe it's roughly 11% of the total contract price, or the project cost is in these services, which is in line with what you would expect.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Okay, then seeing none, I would seek a motion to approve the contract for construction administration and resident project representative services to facilitate the Salem Street Area Utility Improvement Project in the amount of $568,500, and to authorize the town manager to sign said contract amendment.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I would just like to mention, sorry I didn't do it before we did the motion, that the project does include public meetings for neighborhood input and addressing their scheduling, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Thank you. Come to our last discussion item. And as the sun starts setting earlier and it starts getting cooler in the evening, it becomes one of my favorite time of year, and that's budget season. And the Budget Recommendations Committee will be meeting on Wednesday of this week, the 29th, at which time Town Manager Mr. Dean will be presenting the draft budget. But before he does so, every year he takes the opportunity to share the draft budget in the packet and to go over it with the Select Board. So, Mr. Dean, I'll turn it over to you, and then we can take questions, specific questions from the board members.
Sure. I will start with revenues for FY22. Just to go through those, we're anticipating a total of $7,236,223 in revenue, and that's actually on page 24 of your handout. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of changes that we're looking at. And the first is the current use tax, which in FY21 will be $147,770, and that's reduced down to $7,500 in FY22. And the reason for that is we can't actually forecast that revenue source, so we have to be very conservative with how we do that. Second drop is in income from departments. So you'll see on page 24 that is, for the current year, $1,215,000. And that's dropping down to $1 million. And that the reason for that is we are anticipating a health trust refund in FY21, and also we got those Primex refunds, if you recall. So that's why those revenues are where they are.
And when do you think, I know it's usually sometime in October that we hear from the trust?
Yes, so we should know the surplus, the final number for the surplus, October 5th, when the trust meets.
Okay. And similarly, and anything anticipated from Primex?
Not additional.
Okay.
But what we already got this year, we can factor into the revenue structure.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So if we turn to expenses, we're looking at the year 2022. We have put together the department budgets in the last few weeks, and this starts on page 5 of the handout, the general fund budget. So there are 3 main budgets, obviously, we deal with: the general fund, the water fund, and the sewer fund. And the general fund increase year over year right now is 3.39%, but that's a number that's actually compared to the March 2021 voted budget, but that budget also included a police contract, so we actually roll that contract into the cost. So you're comparing $20,566,002 to $19,917,541. So that increase is actually $648,461 over the FY21 approved adjusted budget of $19,917,541. So also on page 5, it notes that this request is independent of CIP warrant articles, which total an additional $328,135, and they're discussed on page 21 and 22 of the document. One of the things that we're bringing forward this year as well is that the town has an unassigned fund balance of $6.1 million right now. So there's a recommendation that another $269,770 in warrant articles are proposed to be funded from the general fund unassigned fund balance. So that sort of sets the budget stage, if you will, as we get into the process. On page 6, you'll note that the different categories of the budget that are laid out there that equal the 3.26% increase. A couple of highlights I'd note: general government, which we can go through in more detail, but general government is up 14.33% over FY21. There are a couple of reasons for that, mainly because the human resources budget is up because we are recommending making a part-time position full-time. And also, the IT budget is up considerably from FY21. Their request is an increase of $98,283, and that's mainly due to a server that they're recommending being purchased, and that's a $53,000 purchase. So they have a number of accounts that are increased and some that are decreased, but the net increase to their budget overall is $98,283, or 33.72%. So they have climbed up quite a bit from FY21. I can go on, Mr. Chairman? Is that
I have a question.
Any questions so far?
Go ahead.
I have a question about the welfare human services line. Why is the anticipation that it will go down?
Because
is there a new source of income, or?
No, we adjusted the direct relief budget down a little bit from electricity spending. So even though we anticipate other areas of the budget either staying the same or increasing just a little bit, we were able to adjust that down based on actuals.
Okay. I'm just thinking that after this year, we're still going to have a ripple effect of people that will be in need of aid.
And that's a good point. We may end up having more discussion around that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So,
Mr. Dean, if I could just make a comment. After spending 3 years on the BRC and 3 years here on the board, I know the IT increase looks high, but I guess I'd say it's probably about time. Annually, it's amazing how they've done so much with so little, and I know that's been discussed, annually during BRC meetings. Even though it looks like a big increase, it doesn't really. I think it's about time.
Well, it does include the full year funding of the network administrator position, and it does also include the purchase of an AI log scanner, which is not my area of expertise, but it's a program called Aristotle Insight, and they feel it's important as part of their recently completed IT audit. So I think, those are some things, when you piece it together, you can begin to understand the increase in the budget. So.
And I think the other thing to take into consideration, and I know the BRC will probably whittle this down a little bit after they vet the various departments and have their subcommittee meetings, but when you look at the fact that all departments last year were asked to take a 10% reduction, and I know that there were no additional staff was added except for that last IT staff member at the 11th hour. I'd like to see the 3.39% come down a little bit, but I think given what we were at last year, I think it's going to be understandable that the percent increase might be a little higher this year.
Yes, and I should have said right at the outset that we are restoring a number of accounts to what I would call pre-COVID levels too. Yep. So that's something that, as you go through the budget throughout, you'll find out that, there are things like education and training accounts that were cut back. The Public Works budget has $100,000 in paving that was actually cut during the COVID year. So when you begin to build on that, you can see why the 3.39% is what it is at this point. And actually, to be upfront, Mr. Chairman, the last few years of budgets have been very, very bare bones. I mean, we went down to 1.46% in the COVID year, which was an exceptional sort of year to be able to ratchet that budget back. And so I would suggest that 3.39% isn't really a bad starting position to be in. So I also wanted to point out that the health insurance reserve, because that's always a matter of interest. Right now, we're budgeting 7.5% for a health insurance increase. So this is an early preliminary look at the budget, and once we get that health insurance rating, it's likely to change. We always knock on wood that it changes for the better. Last year, we budgeted 8.1% for an increase in the health insurance reserve, and we came in at 2.5%. So hopefully, like I said, if we have a decent return again, we should see that 3.39% come down, if it goes our way.
Right.
So just going through some of the other budgets, the town moderator budget is a small budget, but that's an increase as well. Elections and registration is also up, and that's because there will be 3 elections in FY22, the town election and then the state primary and general election in the fall of 2022. In the area of finance, treasurer, tax, and assessing, there is an uptick in the finance budget of 5.78%, and that's, again, part of that is the Munis software agreement that we have and trying to restore some of those pre-COVID levels of education and training and seminars. So there's a corresponding decrease in the audit fees in those accounts as that's shifted over to the water sewer account. The treasurer budget is level fund, so there's no change in that. That's an elected position that's paid a stipend every year. The tax collection budget is a decrease of $6,707 or 6.19%. Part of that change is a discontinuance of the lockbox service. The tax office feels like they can get along without that, so we're going to take their word for it and reduce the budget down by that amount. And then assessing, right now we still have our contract with MRI to do the assessing work in the town, and that's currently under review, but it's the same contract that we're using until year end. So there's a very small increase in that budget, and it's actually postage to pay for sales questionnaires, $800, and there's a reduction in the software agreement line of $1,385. So taking into account wage and benefit adjustments, it's just a 1.18% increase. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay. Moving ahead, the planning budget. The planning budget is actually up by 11.10%, and that is mainly for the part-time natural resources planner. There's an effort to get that position to be full-time, and that position would expand their hours and therefore be able to work with the Energy Committee and the Sustainability Committee. So we're looking to staff those two committees with somebody full-time, because right now our town planner is doing that, and that's a pretty good stretch for everything else that he's got going on, so.
Mr. Dean, thank you for doing that. I think that a couple things on that end. When the Sustainability Committee was first implemented, I know we were looking at, the request was for a full-time position, and the money wasn't there in the budget, and the select board at that time came up with the plan to have Mr. Sharples, who was doing a lot of that work anyway, kind of take that role, but it was always meant to be temporary. Just to remind the rest of the board, it was always meant to be temporary, and I think that having an existing staff member who's expressed the willingness to move to full-time, where she's already been working with Dave, been working with the Energy Committee, is familiar with the Sustainability Committee. I just think that's a great next step in the good faith effort to promote the sustainability that obviously the citizens voted for 3 years ago. So I think that's a very exciting move.
Yeah, and it's an area where we've had a lot of activity and a lot of requests for resources, but we haven't necessarily been able to match the momentum with those resources. Mm-hmm. So this is definitely a good step in that direction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there grant funding to offset that cost at all?
I'm not aware of any, Daryl, as far as like personnel costs. Grants that we might be able to get for personnel come kind of thin. You don't get them very often.
Rather than
they're usually contract services and things like that.
But you bring up a good point that having somebody full-time working with both committees, she would be in a good place to be able to, apply for additional grants and do some extra work in that regard. So we may get that return.
Yeah.
So on we go. Economic development is an increase of $5,584 or 3.79%. The main increase there is the Economic Development Director is looking to complete a certification program sponsored by the University of Oklahoma. There's a cost to that of $3,600. In an effort to sort of offset that cost, consulting services have been reduced down by $1,800 from $3,000 to $1,200. So, and we've also been able to switch a phone plan for the Economic Development Director, so we've saved a little bit of money there. So that is the increase in that account.
What is the certification program?
It is the Economic Development Institute. It's a certification. You become a certified economic developer, and my understanding is that it's the top program in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Inspections in code is 2.84%, $77,704 over FY21. Actually, we got the code enforcement officer a smartphone, so he's now he's joined the ranks of the technologically
the 21st century
savvy. And I got the fire chief laughing on that one, so that's good. Yeah, everybody internally has been waiting for that to happen for a long time, so we're glad to see that. The electrical inspector position's been vacant since mid-2020 due to a retirement during COVID, but the building inspector, code enforcement officer, has actually been performing the duties since the retirement, and that's an advertisement to anyone watching out there. We're looking for an electrical inspector part-time. We have been for quite a while, so if anybody's interested, let us know.
Have we talked to any other communities that also have a part-time inspector? I know it's, they'd have to make their hours definite or however it would work, but I can't believe there are other communities that don't have or have a need for somebody less than full-time.
Well, I know Doug Eastman, our code enforcement officer. Doug's been on the ground sort of trying to feel out other communities that may have that situation. Unfortunately, I think a lot of them around us actually have part-time building inspectors, but they don't necessarily have the electrical background. And some of them use the state to do electrical inspections. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a little trickier than first meets the eye, but it's a good question. You know, like I said, we're going everywhere and anywhere. I know it can be a really good position for somebody who may be retired from the trades. So, you know, again, if there are people out there that are interested, that have that kind of background, we definitely like to talk with them. So moving on, the land use boards and committees, those are very small budgets, as you see here. Most of them are 0% increase. These are the Historic District Commission, the Concom, the Heritage Commission, the Zoning Board. We just budget what we need for recording secretaries and then for public notices of their meetings. So you won't see many of the dollars there. Going on to public safety, the police budget is a 2.28% increase over FY21. I won't get into all the line items, but you can read them there, and those are basically the changes in the budget. There is an education training $4,000 increase for special emphasis on mental health training for officers and dispatchers. So I thought that was a nice add by the chief, and looking to do more of that with his department. And as I said, you can read the rest of the line items there. I don't have to read them for you. The Fire Emergency Management Department, we are looking, this is a 1.10% increase over FY21, and this budget is actually going to include a request for 2 additional firefighters that were recommended to us by the CPSM study, and that would bring the shift strength to 7 for each of the 4 shifts. The department also made a change and reduced the part-time clerical position, and that represented a savings of $17,467 from FY21. And the fire department expense budget is increased by $10,172, or 3.3%. And there are several line items, sort of the ups and downs of the different accounts. I don't know if you had any questions about that right now. No.
Any questions for Mr. Dean?
Clerical, were we able to collapse that?
Yes, and I think that's a good answer for the fire chief while we've got him here.
Sure. Good evening, thank you. And Eric Wilking, Fire Chief. What we did, and we know, we fully understand asking for 2 new full-time hires is a heavy lift. It has been for years. We obviously decided on no personnel last year with COVID, so we did everything we could to look at the lines of the budget that we absolutely needed. So when we looked at our office environment, Susan Balajian worked for us for over 30 years as our office manager. We hired a part-time person to manage a lot of other issues. And I guess the best way to discuss that is with Jenna Gosling, the young lady we hired to fill Susan's position. She has truly embraced technology. She lets things work for her, works seamlessly with finance. I think from day one, the relationship with Doreen and Laura and Melissa was spot on. And we honestly just saw some efficiencies in the office. So we sat down as a collaborative group, brought Jenna in and asked her the question, what do you feel? You know, you're very new to the position. Do you feel comfortable training a part-time person? And that answer was quickly no, but she'd like to use the next year or 2 as her learning experience. So we have not seen any reduction in efficiency, and obviously we've seen more. So I put a lot of trust and faith in she and her answers. I think we're going to push forward, certainly this year. And we may come back and eat crow 2 or 3 years from now and say, can we have that money back? But I think we confidently think we can get by without the part-time position, knowing that those 2 full-time people are going to cost money. So we looked everywhere we could in the budget to minimize that and show that in the 1.1% increase, including those 2 people for half a year. And just I guess it's worth saying, since I got the mic for a couple of seconds, our budget request, although 1.1 over last year, is still $25,000 lower than pre-COVID. So through a number of retirements and changes of personnel, and that still happens today. And I know Mr. Dean and I have been chatting off and on and emailing today. We've had another retirement recently. Those numbers will be reflected in our budget request once the BRC has a chance to see it, and you'll see reductions in our budget just due to another retirement. So it's that fluid. Things change that frequently. So, but thanks for the question. So we look forward to a busy year in the office, but with a young lady, I think is up to the task. So.
Great. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So moving on, Public Safety Shared Services Communication Dispatch, that request is an increase of $5,686 or 1.49% over FY21. And again, those are wage changes and benefits, and expenses are increased $150 in that particular group of accounts. The health budget is one FTE. That's Mr. Murray, who's probably performed like 3 FTEs in the last year or two with COVID-19. James does a great job for us, and that account is up 3.15%. Education and training has been increased in that account. That's another one of those, again, just trying to support the health department education component of that operation as much as we can.
Mr. Dean, before, and this doesn't have to do with the budget, but do we require the health officer to live in town?
No, we don't.
Okay. I'm trying to remember, something happened at the State House this year regarding health officers, but I don't remember what it was.
There was a new, there was an HB 79 piece of legislation passed that actually requires the health officer now to meet with the select board at least once per year.
Yes.
And go through the different elements of what's happening in public health, and that maybe there was some residency requirement talk around that.
Yeah, I think so, and but it didn't get in there, so that's good.
Yeah, that would be very difficult for us, I think, to have a health officer that lived in town. So moving on to the Public Works budget, you have several divisions in Public Works, and I'll just hit the highlights, but administration and engineering is up 3.53% over FY21. Again, that's another one of those accounts that includes restoration of $3,000 for professional development, and that had been reduced down in the COVID-19 budget. One of the accounts that has come back is the highway paving. This is the next budget, highways and streets. There's an increase of $137,443 in that particular budget, and they've also increased street marking, seeing some inflationary increase in that, $10,000, and an increase in vehicle maintenance of $10,000 as well. So they do have some increases and decreases in those accounts, but overall the net out is $137,443 in increases. A lot of bricks and mortar in those accounts. Snow removal is a 0.65% increase, so we've successfully warded off some bad winters in recent years. So the Snow and Ice Deficit Fund has a balance of $103,150 in it as of August 2021. So therefore, when we look ahead for snow removal, it's easier to level fund it and not have to worry too much about it. Knock on wood, because we've had one year where it was in excess of $400,000. It can happen, but it's rare, not the norm. Solid waste is a decrease of $63,830. Most of that is from two things happening. One is that the GZA contract for the Powder Mill Road analysis and the Crossroad analysis, those monitoring requirements and repairs have gone away or have been completed. They're being completed this month, or the month coming up in October. And the extra value associated with recyclables, that market's actually come back some, so that's given us a little bit of budget latitude that way. I will say it's probably short-lived because the solid waste contract is up in May of 2022. It's been 5 years, believe it or not, and we are in the process right now of renegotiating that contract with Waste Management. And so we probably will see an increase in those accounts coming forward. That's like in flux right now. So I just wanted to let the board know in advance, because we may come back with a different number depending upon how things go with that.
Is there any increased competition presently as opposed to 5 years ago? Because wasn't it 5 years ago it was really hard to find?
Yes. And it still is. You do have some haulers out there. Casella's one. You probably see their trucks around. But I would say it's a reduced market.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
And you can recall probably the days when we had Northside Karting, where we had such a favorable contract with them, but then at the end of their run, the service got bad enough where we actually had people that wanted to change vendors. And so we always are kind of in that, weighing all that out while we look at a new vendor. Streetlights is level funded, so that's been the same since FY19 when we converted the inventory of streetlights to LED, so we're not expecting any change in that budget. And any questions about streetlights?
I just had one question. There seem these random ones that didn't get changed to LEDs. Is that because they're owned privately or?
They could be, but if you do see them, let us know.
Okay, corner of High Street and Portsmouth Ave.
All right, High Street and Portsmouth Ave.
Yeah.
Okay. Doesn't sound like a privately owned one.
No, I don't think so.
We'll look at that.
It's on a utility pole.
Okay.
It just stands out now because there aren't any like it.
Yeah, we will definitely check on that for you. The stormwater budget is increased because of obligations that we have with the town's long-term control plan for nitrogen. You've heard a lot about nitrogen. You know that we're in a Great Bay nitrogen permit, and we have to do several things that are compliant with EPA and MS4 and various compliance issues. So we've increased that budget by $10,360 for permit compliance activities. And then there's also Paul Vlasich was in front of you, I think a few meetings ago, talking with you about the catch base, some of the nitrogen strategies, reduction strategies, and part of that is rebuilding faulty catch basins with poor sump infrastructure, and each basin costs approximately $4,000 to rebuild. So the budget has funding for seven catch basins in there. So I'm sure that will get discussion as we go along with the Budget Recommendations Committee. Any questions about DPW? Okay. The maintenance budget, the maintenance general budget is an increase of 3.48%. And again, that's several different accounts. There's some education and training that have been brought back there. Again, all of these include wage and benefit changes too, so there can be those kinds of changes in these accounts.
I have a question that is really not so important to the overall budget, but is important to the Historic District Commission. Some of the HDC signs that designate the neighborhoods are faded or just plain blank, and that's a maintenance issue, or has been forever. So I'm just asking if it can be fit in there somewhere, do one at a time or something like that. Mm-hmm. I've had complaints from former HDC members.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, anything, this is the board's budget, right, that goes to town meeting. So yep. If there are things that you don't see in this budget that you think should be in the budget, then let's have a conversation offline about that. I think that's important.
Yeah, that's just a minimal thing, but it's something that needs to be done.
And we may be able to fund that through another means, like the sign budget in the highway department, for example, or we may be able to find a few dollars. It just depends what the scope of it is. So the town buildings utilities accounts is, that's just a 0.25% increase, or $730 over FY21. So we have a pretty favorable contract right now for 7.47 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity. So that's helping keeping that budget down. And then we also have a favorable per therm cost for natural gas. We got in under the wire where natural gas really started increasing, and so that therm rate that we have has been holding. So that those accounts are fairly level, which is good. And then the maintenance projects budget, we have our typical $100,000 request that is made every year, and there's a list of projects in your packet. There's a combination of things: public safety complex, energy efficiency, attic insulation project at the town hall, room renovations at the town hall gallery, the main entrance, replacement of overhead doors and exterior steel doors at the public works complex for $20,000, and then repointing and sealing the tile flooring and base at the Swayze gazebo downtown, $5,000, the bandstand. So those are those accounts. Maintenance garage is an increase of $4,808, or 1.76%. The one change there outside of wages and benefits are an increase in $900 in the mechanics tools account. We furnish tools to the mechanics, and they've gone several years without an adjustment, so we're looking to increase that for them. Any questions on those? All right, we've made it to Welfare Human Services. That budget request is $178,153. That's a 0.94% decrease from FY21. There is an increase in non-direct relief expenses of $40 and a reduction in direct relief expenses of $465. The electricity line is reduced by $1,500. I think I mentioned that already. And then the Human Service Agency funding line is reduced by $1,615 or 1.5%. And that, I just want to emphasize for the board that that's after a review of all the agency requests. So the Human Services Funding Committee has reviewed all the requests they have met, and that is the amount that they're recommending go forward for FY22. Then Parks and Rec is an increase of 7.34%. In total over FY21. The wages and benefits are noted here. We had personnel change. We had the Assistant Parks and Rec Director moved over to the Human Resource Director, Assistant Town Manager, so there are some benefit changes in the Recreation Department. And expenses have been reduced by $2,500. And that's a reduction in the senior services line item to be offset by grants and donations. So their plan is to go out and get grants and donations to fill that gap. The parks budget is an increase of 5.09% over FY21. Again, you've got benefit changes there just from personnel changes, and we restructured and have a parks foreman and a full-time laborer. So that's one of the reasons that those accounts are up where they are. And there's also a request in here by the department to buy a closed and enclosed trailer for carrying parks equipment. So looking for $5,000 for that. And there's been some corresponding decreases in other line items to try to get it down into a more reasonable figure. So total general expenses are $90,450, a decrease from $765 from the FY21 budget for that. Other culture and recreation remains the same as FY21. So the FY22 request is the same, and these are small accounts, but they're obviously very important ones. And they support the events like Christmas lights, the holiday parade, summer concerts, the Exeter Brass Band veterans activities, and the Independence Museum Festival fireworks. Excuse me.
Has the brass band had an increase since 1979?
I started in
just asking because I think I get paid some of that $3,500 when I was in high school.
Yeah. Probably not. You would know better than I, because my budget history only goes back to 2005, and I know it's been $3,500 since 2005.
It was $7 a concert, and we played for 2 months, not just for July. So it might have been more. Anyway, it's just an aside.
Yeah, the holiday parade actually does include $1,500 that was added to the budget. If you remember, there was a citizens petition that added that $1,500 in, so we built it into the base of it, and now it's $4,500. Mm-hmm. The library budget is a budget that we don't control. The library trustees are responsible for that, and their increase is $42,884 or 3.97% over FY21. And the public services lines for that are level funded from FY21, so those are things like utilities and books and all the operating expenses of the library. So that's level funds from FY21, but the rest of the remainder of the budget's up 3.97%. So we're on to debt service and capital. Overall, it's a decrease of $131,670. or 7.42% under FY21. And just to capture the debt service real quick, their principal payments on debt service in FY22, including the first year of the Salem Street Utilities Bond, and that expense is offset by retirement of the Great Dam Study. So net principal has increased $21,196 or 2.1%. And debt service interest is decreased 2.6% because we have some maturing debt that we're taking off the books, or the interest being charged is lower because the debt's older. And then the debt service budget also includes the first-year interest payment on the Salem Street project of $39,148, so that's been added to the list. For vehicles replacement and leases, we're down, that's really where the decrease is. It's $142,957. Just to let the board know, CIP page 106 has the most recent lease purchase schedule, and FY21 is the last payment on ladder 1, which is a good pay down, and a DPW dump truck. And the lease purchase budget has been reduced as a result to $143,658 from $296,15. $110,000 is being requested to replace 2 police cruisers with hybrid interceptor cruisers. We typically do that in the operating budget, so that's where you'd see it. And then other vehicles included in the FY22 budget are listed as proposed warrant articles, with some to be funded from fund balance. So like I alluded to earlier, there's some vehicle replacements that I'm not contemplating for the operating budget at this time based upon the percentages. But I know that, and we all know that the budget process is fluid, so, some of the recommendations could change on that. Then benefits and taxes, the increase is $192,268 on that. And again, that's where the health insurance reserve is being held. So that is really the lion's share of the increase there. And that'll get redistributed once the health trust sets its insurance rates. So we have any questions on the general fund?
Just to note, as you've gone through these very thoroughly, going back to page 6, it's interesting when you look at the percent increase between last year and this year. I think the real fair comparison is to compare FY22 to FY20.
Yeah.
Because last year's budget was unique. And I think that if, Mr. Dean, I don't know if you'll have time to do this, I hope you will for the Budget Committee and certainly for the board and folks for a future packet. I think if folks can see the breakdown between FY20 and FY22, these percent increases this year are not going to seem as drastic as they may if you just hear the number.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Just a note.
We usually go back a few years on the budget.
The BRC does, but I mean, if folks at home, are watching or they're looking at this right now, some of these numbers may seem staggering. Mm-hmm. But when you look at, and I think you alluded when you started the conversation, when you look at 2 years ago, the percent increases in many departments is not as large as it may seem. You're going back to where you were.
On the full budget line item, it has that.
Anyway.
Thank you. And that's a good point, and I think that is something we can include as part of the conversation with the BRC and with yourselves as we proceed through the process this year. So we're looking at 3 bond articles for the general fund right now. This is page 20. The 10 Hampton Road property purchase. Obviously, we had a presentation on that at your last meeting, and that's $1,150,000. So that warrant article will go forward with the purchase and sale agreement in place. And I don't need to describe the project to you because you heard it the other night, but I'm sure that will get a lot more discussion as the budget process unfolds. And then we have Pickpocket Dam modification for $300,000. Since the time of this writing, we have actually received 2 outside funding grants for this. One is a $40,000 coastal resiliency grant, and then also a $75,000 state revolving fund grant, which is really loan forgiveness. So we're looking at a project now that's $185,000. So it falls in that space where it's not quite a bonded article. Mm-hmm. So there may be some other funding sources that we look at to try to get to that 185. And then the third one is the West Side Drive Area Reconstruction Design Funds. The Public Works Department just held a meeting with the neighborhood. I believe it was 2 weeks ago. So they just are spending that original $100,000 and getting through that to get to the next step in their design. And these design funds that we'd be looking for in FY22 would continue that process, and they would come through a combination of general funds, water fund, and sewer fund. Then for individual articles, we have the 3 collective bargaining agreements. We didn't talk about that as of yet, but we do have 3 contracts that are up, so that could have will have a fiscal impact if we're able to reach agreement with the bargaining units as part of the FY22 budget. And then there are several warrant articles for consideration. The first 2 are the SCBA. These are lease purchases, and this is the SCBA equipment for the fire department, and that would, assuming a 7-year lease purchase for that would be $59,064. And then the police body-worn cameras, which is something that was submitted in the CIP process as well. I do want to point out that we are looking for outside funding for the body-worn cameras, and that's been put in, so hopefully that bears fruit and we can direct those funds, have those funds so we don't have to spend the ones that we put out for the body-worn cameras, but it's a very value-added project, obviously. Then we have warrant articles that are non-debt service capital articles, the Rains Barn improvements. You've heard a lot about that in the CIP process. That is the net cost to the town on that would be a warrant article of $100,000. And that's one that I would include as part of that $269,770 to be funded from fund balance. So something to consider there. Replacing a 1-ton with a dump body truck in Public Works. That's in page 71 of the CIP, and that's also recommended to be funded by the fund balance. The intersection improvements plan, this actually moved up a year. This was a FY23 in the CIP, but with everything that we've been talking about with intersections, we felt it was prudent to move that up. So in talking with DPW Director Perry, we figured that was a good change. So glad that came forward that way. And then the Public Works facility garage for $50,000. That would be allocated $20,000 general fund, $15,000 water fund, and $15,000 sewer fund. And it's reduced from $75,000 in the CIP.
I'm sorry, I was gone. Can I go back to the police body-worn cameras? Mm-hmm. In the last state budget, we passed an appropriation for body-worn cameras for distribution to towns, and I don't remember if it's in a grant form or an outright distribution, but we should look at that also. It might bring this number down.
Okay. Yeah, I know Chief Poulin was looking at multiple pots of money for this. It wasn't just the congressional direct spend, it was the state pot of money too, so maybe there's an avenue there for that. The Parks Improvement Fund, in conversations with Director Bisson, we talked about reducing that amount from the typical 150 down to 50,000, so we felt that was a good year. It was a good year with the Hampton Road coming forward to drop this in half with the big project being on the warrant. So that's been reduced down to 50,000, and that amount would be funded via fund balance. Again, we can have more discussions about funding sources, but that's the recommendation. Then a recommendation for Car 3 in the replacement in the fire department. That's a 2010 vehicle that they're looking to replace, and that's on page 41 of the CIP, and that would be recommended to be funded by fund balance. The facilities condition assessment is something that's been put forward as an initiative by the facilities committee, and that's on page 2 of the CIP. I think for those of you who know what the facilities committee's been up to and their activities, that's something that they've been wanting for quite some time. So that's on the list of warrant articles for consideration. Then replacing 2 Jeep Patriots in the Public Works Department. One would be replacing the current 65 vehicle with a Ford Explorer hybrid. And if that worked out, then the Jeep 65 would be swapped over to water sewer with Sedan 13, so it would be handed down essentially to another department. Then replacing Jeep 51, which I mentioned, that's on page 87 of the CIP, and that's a $31,500 item. And then the bike and pedestrian improvement plan for the planning department, that's on page 9 of the CIP. They've had several studies that they'd like to get off the ground, and that's been one that's been at the forefront for quite a while. ARPA-funded projects, I just wanted to touch on these real quick. They're both in the CIP, the Great Bay Total Nitrogen Permit work that Public Works is forwarding and wants to be working on. The note here is that this would be eligible for ARPA funding, so the 1.6 million we have, we could dedicate some of that to this use. And also the Winter Street Stormwater Mitigation Project, that's something that would be out in the Winter Street area, either Kids Park or somewhere near Kids Park, and it's a stormwater BMP that gets us compliance points with EPA. And that funding for that project would be $66,800 town and a grant for $100,200. So if ARPA can fund that, it takes it off the books and basically allows us to complete the project without seeking tax dollars to fund it. And then, believe it or not, because I know this list is long, there are a list of deferrals. The first is Sedan 24 in the Public Works Department for $24,000. The second is the replacement of a sidewalk tractor for $162,400, and that's in DPW. And then a truck replacement in Public Works, $51,252. I've also recommended at this point that we defer the replacement of engine 5 for another year. That's a 20-year-old engine, and I know the chief's plan and the fire department's plan is to replace every 20 years to try to do that, but that's just to try to buy another year, acknowledging we can't fund everything every year. Also, the town office geotechnical evaluation, Public Works has taken that and moved it to FY23. So basically, they've taken the intersection improvement program and plugged that in its spot. And then replacement of the hot box number 60, which is in the CIP on page 63. That's a Public Works initiative. And then the fire inspector vehicle replacement for $41,250. We'll try to get another year out of the fire inspector vehicle. That's a 2012, so it'll be one more year for that. So just in terms of the total numbers that you're looking at right now, the FY22 preliminary budget, $20,566,002. The FY22 warrant articles, non-fund balance, general fund, would be $328,135. So just a quick comment on that. Initially, we had over 600,000 in warrant articles. So if you look at the fund balance allocation and you look at the ones that you have left, we've basically taken half of the warrant articles and recommended they be funded in the traditional manner, and then half be funded by fund balance. So that's the change this year from our normal mode. We're in a little different mode. So the FY22 preliminary total is $20,894,137. The total FY21 appropriations, $20,167,541, and so the total dollars appropriations over FY21 is $726,596, and that equates to a 3.6% change from FY21 to 22, and the tax impact is 39 cents per thousand evaluation. It's really early to estimate a tax impact. Obviously, we're talking about a budget that will be based on next year's value. So we take the current year value and we add, I think it's 1% to it, and then it is 1%. That's what we add to it, and then we do the calculation based upon that. But that gives you a relative idea of where we would be. Any questions or comments?
Any thoughts or questions for Mr. Dean before we jump into water sewer? Okay, thank you, Mr. Dean.
You're welcome. So water sewer, the water fund is a 4.92% increase over FY21, $4,253,495, so 4.92% increase. The sewer fund is a 6.19% increase, $7,449,750. So the two funds together equal a 5.72% increase over FY21. Just to go through the water budget, in terms of administration, the administration budget in water is up 5.76%. $23,595 over FY21. There's an increase in the consulting line of $5,000, and that's to create a lead service line replacement plan. So that is not something we have currently. And then, again, professional development opportunities, we've tried to restore those to pre-COVID levels at $3,000, and then the remainder of changes are wages and benefit changes. The water billing budget is an increase of $20,954, or 12.24%. There's an increase in audit fees in this particular account, and this is also going to be mirrored in the sewer account. An increase of $10,501 in the software agreement line for Munis and MuniLink software, and then an increase to $550 in travel reimbursement, and that's for Munis training. That's actually to reimburse Munis for doing training here. And then an education training line increase to allocate a portion of the Munis training to the water sewer budgets. The distribution budget in water is a 2.15% increase over FY21. And there are some different accounts, but the one I make note of is that the fire department got out of the fire alarm monitoring business, so the water department and the sewer departments are now paying for their own fire alarms for pump stations. So they have an agreement for that, but it is an added cost to the budget. There's also an increase in GIS software of $1,500, and then meter replacements have been increased by $3,000 to replace more meters. And as Jennifer Perry always says, those are the cash registers in the system, so we try to fund those each year. The water treatment budget is up 2.7% over FY21. The main increases there are supplies and lab equipment for increased testing to comply with Safe Drinking Water Act, using certified labs, and then the fire alarm communications is increased in that budget as well. The lab testing has been increased by $2,000 for increased lead copper testing as well on water. And then the water treatment chemicals have been increased by $4,000. The water debt service is up 4.74%, or $59,835 over FY21. That's the Salem Street Utilities project there, and the second payment on the groundwater surface water assessment program. Then in capital outlay, we have an increase of $53,970. That's 10.47% over FY21. And in this budget, because they're enterprise funds, that's where you'll see the vehicle and equipment requests. And there are two in there. A Ford Escape Hybrid, three. Ford Escape Hybrid, a half-ton crew cab hybrid, which is split 50-50 with the sewer fund, and a 3/4-ton crew cab for water only. So those vehicle requests are $93,970, and it's always very traditional for the Budget Recommendations Committee to vet those vehicle requests along with the general fund to find the right balance there. The water budget is carrying $460,000 for water system capital outlay, and as part of the conversation, the water sewer manager and I have had discussions along with Director Perry about the company called Suez coming in and doing filter and clarifier work on the surface water plant. So that's actually $335,000 of this request. And that is a company that right now they do our painting and sandblasting and maintenance on our water tanks. And typically you pay more in the first 3 or 4 years of the contract, and then it drops off precipitously from that. So they've been a good company, they've been good to work with, so they are being considered to do this work at the surface water plant, which obviously we always talk about needs a lot of upgrading and attention to detail. And then additional requests are for rehab of Larry Lane Well, and then a rehab of Stadium Well as in addition to that. So that's the water fund. I will mention West Side Drive because that's part of general water and sewer. So the sewer fund at 6.19%. The administration is up $993, or 0.21% over FY21. So there's a reduction in consulting services of $20,000 in that particular account. There's increases in the legal expense line to deal with the permit issues, and then some professional development, as we said, related to which was reduced during COVID-19. We're bringing that back in that particular budget. Then the sewer billing budget is a mirror, again, of the water budget. It's basically a split 50-50. So it includes allocations for different positions that we have that do a function within that area. And then, as I mentioned in the water budget, the increases are the same, the software agreement and the audit fees, et cetera. The collection budget is up 1.65%, so it's an increase of $12,115 over FY21. So you can see the budget increases there, and again, that's another one that has the fire alarm communication cost to it, and also the $1,500 increase in GIS software from our vendor. Sewer treatment is up 7.43%, $98,792. The largest items there are the $59,000 for additional lab testing under the Great Bay Integrated Permit, and $22,500 in equipment maintenance for a Solar Bee maintenance contract. And I will say that is also something we flagged for potential ARPA funds. Mm-hmm. So that $59,000 we're looking into right now to see if that would qualify as an ARPA expense. So be able to take that off possibly. The sewer debt service is up 6.33%, or $260,158. That's due to the lagoon sludge removal project that was approved by the voters and the sewer portion of the Salem Street Utilities project. So what isn't in here yet is the siphons, because we haven't completed that project, so you don't see that in here. Then the sewer capital outlay is up 19.21%, or $41,374, and there's a list of projects that go with that, and also some vehicle and equipment requests that are made by the department. Any questions about any of those? Again, this is the first step in a very long process.
Right. Siphons will go into sewer debt service?
Eventually it will.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do we have a figure yet? Is it?
We do not have a figure. Well, we know the gap if we do a full phase, like everything at the same time. The gap is $942,000, and we're trying to get $600,000 through the correct Congressional Direct Spending Program. So that would leave a $342 to make up, to make that project whole. And again, one of the funding sources for that could be ARPA, which is set up for that. Okay. Or it could be the sewer reserves, but we could have that conversation when we will have that conversation when the time comes, obviously.
And ARPA is totally unrelated to CDS?
ARPA is totally unrelated to CDS, yes.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So the bond issues for the sewer fund are West Side Drive, which we talked about already. It's an allocation of the sewer portion of that project. The Court Street Design Project, which is $400,000. The sewer capacity rehabilitation, which Public Works, after a conversation with Public Works, was reduced from $500,000 to $200,000 just to do the design phase of that, to get us a scope for the rest of the project. And then the Webster Avenue Pump Station project. And I will just say about Webster Avenue Pump Station right now, they're reconsidering the cost estimates of that again. So I'm not sure that will be a discussion item in this budget cycle, but whether or not it's ready for the warrant is a question at this point. So wanted to report that out to the board. So the revolving funds are cable TV, EMS, and recreation. Those are non-appropriated funds. And every year we generate revenue estimates, and those are listed here. And I think the one thing I'd say about the three funds are in the EMS revolving fund, we're looking to replace an ambulance. So that is funded through that revolving fund and not through the town warrant. So we do a lease purchase on a new ambulance for 3 or 5 years, just depending upon the rates and what was more favorable. So that's a lot. I realize our budget's a lot. What I like to say usually at the end of the process is that even going through all that, our budget really represents 24% of the tax rate. Mm-hmm. So everything that you just heard about here tonight represents about 1/4 of your bill. So I think we try to give a lot of value for what we do and make that happen. So There it is.
Any overall questions or comments for Mr. Dean on the budget?
No, I think.
Good work.
Yeah, good. I was going to say, that was thorough.
Thank you.
Mr. Dean, very thorough report as always, and I know we'll be looking forward to the BRC kicking off Wednesday when you present this again to them, and they'll start their subcommittee work immediately. And I believe there's a CIP meeting, or preliminary CIP meeting for sometime in early to mid-October. The general government meeting is, I believe, October 22nd, that Friday. And then the other subcommittees will meet over the next couple of weeks from there. And typically, the first week in December, Chair Kelly will give a presentation to the Select Board with the Budget Recommendations Committee suggestions and recommendations. And then we as a board will continue discussing throughout December and January till our budget hearing, which is the third Tuesday in January.
Correct.
And then off to deliberative session.
Off to deliberative session.
So there's a lot here, but I think you did a really nice job going through, all the different departments and not going through all the line items, obviously, but it is staggering to see just how little was in the budget last year compared to the prior year. And I think that when folks analyze between 20 and 22, it's not as staggering as it may appear.
Mm-hmm. And my recommendation is always, to take, I think it's 31 pages that we put together at the beginning of this process and absorb it, because there are things in here about the 5-year tax rate trend and different elements of percentages of our budgets. And if you have questions or you want to talk about something specific within the budget, feel free to reach out. I mean, that's always something that, I'm happy to have a conversation with about with the board members. And, you may see things in here, oh, what about this? What about that? Feel free to reach out.
Thank you. I'll see you Wednesday night.
Sounds good.
This is a good rehearsal for you. Okay, if there are no other questions of Mr. Dean, we can jump into regular business. There are no tax abatements, or credits, or exemptions. Mr. Dean, you've got some tax deeds, though, for review?
I do. I have, unfortunately, this is one of the tough parts about our job, is that we deal with tax deeding, and that the role of there's a role for the town manager, who is the tax collector in Exeter, and then the board to deal with tax deeding properties. And tonight, I have a pile of file folders behind me that I'll actually ask, through you, Mr. Chairman, the clerk of the board, to read through and sign off on deed waivers for these particular properties.
Okay.
I will tell you, there's probably 40 of them or so. And the reason that we're recommending a deed waiver, not taking a tax deed, which is the other thing that you would do, is because the properties represent some kind of a liability to the town if we were to take them for tax purposes. So I have that, and I can bring it on over when you're ready.
So you're recommending a waiver on all of the properties?
Not on all of them, but I have a group of properties that, based upon conversations I had with the deputy tax collector today, I still want to follow up on to do a little bit more due diligence, but that I will bring back to the board at another meeting, and we may have to have, whether it's a non-public session or some form of the meeting where we sit down and have a conversation about what's left, because there are some properties right now that, if lacking further knowledge about them, and when you're dealing with properties, you only know as much as you're able to find out, right? So there are some properties in the town that are single-family homes that, we may have people living in, and, it's that can be an issue, right? So we need to have a conversation about that at another time. So.
The files that you have here this evening, are you comfortable with a 4-person board? I mean, obviously we have a quorum, but you're comfortable with a 4-person board?
I am.
Okay.
So what I have, just as an example, is there's a map and lot and a property owner, and then it's a standard deed waiver piece of the document that says the selectmen of the town of Exeter hereby notifies Russell Dean tax collector that it will not accept the tax collector's deed because in its judgment, acceptance and ownership of the real estate would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risk per RSA 8076-2A. So that's on every single one of these.
And they each have to be read individually, presumably?
Because they're individual properties, yes.
Okay.
Yay. So we're,
Do you want, Mr. Dean, the clerk to read them, or do you want me to read them, or?
It's up to you, Mr. Chairman.
is it this whole list in front of us?
It's many of them, Julie, but it's not all of them.
It's not, he has the files, right?
Right.
Then can I have the files if I'm going to read them? I need the files.
Do you want to do it, or do you want me to do it?
No, I'll do it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I move to waive the tax deeding on map 104, lot 79, unit 602, because of acceptance and ownership of the real estate would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the tax deeding on map lot 64, lot 105, map 64, lot 105, unit 30, because in our judgment, the acceptance or ownership of the real estate would subject to the municipality to undesirable obligation or liability risk.
Second.
So a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the deeding of map, this one does not have it. Map 95, lot 64, unit 3, because in our judgment, the acceptance and ownership of the real estate would be subjecting the municipality to undesirable obligations and liability risks.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the tax deeding for property located at map 104, lot 79, unit 139, because in its judgment, acceptance of the ownership of the real estate would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations and liabilities of risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the deeding of map 95, lot 64, unit 239, as in its judgment, and acceptance and ownership of the real property would create, subject to the municipality to undesirable obligations and liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the tax deeding of map 104, lot 79, unit 229, because in its judgment, an acceptance and ownership of the real estate would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the tax deeding for map 87, lot 14, unit 21B, because in its judgment, the acceptance and ownership of the real estate would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the deeding of map 110, lot 2, unit 80,
because in its judgment, acceptance and ownership of the real estate would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the tax dating for map 104, lot 79, unit 701, because in its judgment, an acceptance and ownership of the real property would subject the town and the municipality to undesirable obligations and liabilities or risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the tax deeding on map 87, lot 8, unit A16, due to, because in its judgment, acceptance and ownership of the real property would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the tax deeding for map 95, lot 64, unit 82, because in its judgment, acceptance and ownership of the real estate would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the tax deeding for map 95, lot 64, unit 228, because in its judgment, the acceptance and ownership of the real estate would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the deeding for map 104, lot 79, unit 524, because in its judgment, acceptance of the ownership of the real property would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations and liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the tax deeding for map 95, lot 64, unit 165, because in its judgment, the acceptance and ownership of the real estate would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations and liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the tax deeding for map 103, lot 13, unit 37. In its judgment, acceptance of ownership of the real property would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to waive the deeding on, running out of breath, lot 95, unit 64, map 95, lot 64, unit 332, because in its judgment, acceptance and ownership of the real estate would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Break, Julie?
Motion passes 4-0.
Do you want to break?
You want me to
Share the wealth?
Yeah, let me just look for a second. There's one I have to abstain from.
Okay.
It's cruel and unusual punishment. It's illegal.
I don't know if it's here. Doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like it. Speak away.
Okay.
Or should you have Selectman Brown do this so you don't have to make a motion?
Yeah, do you mind, Selectman Brown? Yeah. Good point. Thanks, Daryl. One more.
All right. Let's see. Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map lot 7262 on the ground, 60-2 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks per 8076 2A.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map 104-79-421 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map lot 64-105-82 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map lot 95-64-222 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map lot 103-15-11 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map lot 95-64-308 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map lot 103-13-26 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map lot 87-14-1A on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map lot 104-79-513 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map lot 95-64-175 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map lot 104-79-230 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map lot 111-5-1 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map lot 95-64-15 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map lot 95-64-182 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map lot 95-64-180 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move that we execute the deed waiver on map lot 103-15-3 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move we execute the deed waiver on map lot 95-64-125 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move we execute the deed waiver on map lot 95-64-214 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move we execute the deed waiver on map lot 95-64-327 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move we execute the deed waiver on map lot 104-79-317 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move we execute the deed waiver on map lot 104-79-144 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move we execute the deed waiver on map lot 95-64-382 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move we execute the deed waiver on map lot 95-64-69 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move we execute the deed waiver on map lot 103-11 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move we execute the deed waiver on map lot 103-15-15 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move we execute the deed waiver on map lot 95-64-41 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move we execute the deed waiver on map lot 104-79-523 on the grounds that it would subject the municipality to undesirable obligations or liability risks.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to make Selectman Brown be the reader of all these things all the time.
I object.
Very nicely done.
Sold.
Do we have those more?
No, to sign, yeah.
To sign, okay. Selectman Brown, thank you.
The auctioneer is now.
And thank,
Goes up.
and thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, Mr. Dean, the town manager's report, please.
Just a couple of things tonight. One is that we met last week. It was Kate Miller, who is our town moderator. She's also our special counsel for cable TV matters. So we met with Kate and Andy Swanson, our IT coordinator, about the cable TV contracts. So hopefully we'll have something forthcoming for you fairly soon on that. There's some new laws that are on the books regarding cable TV, and then there's the whole conversation about cable in general and kind of where it's headed. So we've got some ideas that we can share with the board. Like to have Kate in at a future meeting to talk about them with you. And then the last Thursday, we've been working with a few of our blind residents on the Omni ballot system. It's the one for all system. We've been looking at ways that we can implement that system locally for town elections. And Omni ballot was here last Thursday and gave us a presentation about their product. They've given us some pricing. It's actually about $1,000 to buy the tablet and get the software license. So the costs seem to be pretty favorable. It's just a matter of making sure that what they are promising they can deliver, which is not always something you get from a sales type of meeting. So we have set up a second follow-up meeting with them, with their personnel, to actually, they're going to take one of our ballots and actually put it onto their system, so we'll actually be able to see it and see how it works. So when that meeting is set, the time for it is set, we will send a message out, and any board member is welcome to come to that and see the system in full bloom. We had about 8 to 10 people here for the last one, but we were just getting warmed up at that stretch. So,
Mr. Dean, was this the company, because I attended the first meeting, what was it now, probably a month or two ago? Was this the outfit out of Florida that was presented?
I believe they're out of Washington State.
Okay.
And they're the same company that works with the state of New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
So the One for All program that they use at the state level in New Hampshire is done with this company the company's called Democracy Live.
Yes.
And that's who sells the product.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
they work in a number of different states, so. And Kate Miller was present at the meeting last week, which was helpful.
Thank you.
That's all I had.
Okay, thank you for your brevity.
Budget Committee Wednesday night.
Okay. Select Board Committee reports, Selectman Brown?
I have nothing to report.
Okay, and Selectwoman Gilman?
Yeah, I made all my notes on my agenda and then I buried it under tax deeding and whatnot.
Well, while you do that, I attended.
I got it.
Oh, never mind.
I had a full couple of weeks, so. The HDC met and we tabled our one application for replacement windows, and the applicant was very willing to do so because the choice of replacement was something that is really not recommended in the HDC, and we didn't want to rule on it without her having done the applicant having done a little bit more research. The Conservation Commission, you saw the one thing that we talked about was the Menendez-Grissett Trust donation. And the other thing was that the Skywatch, which was supposed to be this weekend where everybody can bring their telescopes out to Rains Farm, has been postponed, or cloudy postponed until for 2 weeks, till the 13th-ish. That'll be posted on the Conservation Commission's website. I don't have the thing written down. The Heritage Commission met to discuss a date for a demolition review public hearing for demolition of 7 Wadley Street, and that's set for October 6th at 7 p.m. here in the Novak Room. And also the discussion of the Park Street neighborhood area district. It's a complex thing. We've decided to trim it way down and make another proposal to the neighborhood about what it can do for them. And then I've been named as an alternate to the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. And our first meeting is on the 1st.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And that's it.
That's it? Okay. Selectwoman Rantriola?
So Swayze Parkway Trustees meeting was last week, Wednesday. Primary discussion was about tree work and the number of trees that need to be worked on, and a presentation given by Darius on how the bidding process would be managed in the future. And so that was the majority of what was discussed, and then also an irrigation update. Because I guess at the evening that the police had the
National Night Out,
they realized that we had some issues with some of the water system. So that's on to be discussed or figured out, I guess. And that's it.
Great, thank you very much. I attended the River Advisory Committee last Thursday. May go down as one of the shortest meetings, Mr. Dean, in history. I think it was less than 15 minutes.
That would be a great discussion point.
I've had shorter.
Okay, well, I will take your word for it. But we had a quorum, and essentially Paul Vlasic, town engineer, gave us an update on the Pickpocket Dam, and based on his presentation, it was agreed we wouldn't meet again until November because there wasn't anything that we could do in October. So more to come in November. I know Selectwoman Cowan had a planning board meeting she can catch us up on next Monday. I watched it on TV, but I won't steal her thunder. It was a good meeting. Also, Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf and I met last week in our ongoing mission. We set a goal setting that we were going to be reviewing committees and boards and bringing some suggestions and recommendations. We finalized what our recommendations will be, and more than likely, we're going to write that up together. We'll have that by the October 18th Select Board meeting, so if we could get that on the agenda, Mr. Dean.
Will do.
The memo will be brief. We stuck to about 4 or 5 points, and it was nice work, and we got a lot done in that period of time, so thank you for that. Okay, reviewing the board calendar, we're going to meet because of the holiday on the 11th. We'll meet again next Monday on the 4th, and then again on the 18th. Next Monday on the 4th, we'll try to, I'd like to, Mr. Dean, if we can, get a preliminary calendar through the rest of the year so that folks can plan accordingly with holidays and travel and all of that coming up. That would be good for the board. Correspondence. Last week, September 20 through 26 was Rail Safety Week, and in our packet we have a presentation from Amtrak requesting that the public review the awareness campaign to keep residents safe in and around trains and train tracks. We also received a granite watering trough by Mr. and Mrs. Robert and Leslie Webb, and Mr. Perkins wrote a note to Mr. Dean with a picture of it. Mr. Dean sent the thank you note. That's in our packet. And then lastly, we have the administration of transportation laws and a list of the public hearing schedule for 2023 through 2032.
That reminds me of one thing, Mr.
Please.
Chair, that I forgot. There's a redistricting committee that's set up by the state. It's not a formal committee, but they are the ones that are going to make the recommendations for redistricting. And they meet in every county for their proposal based on the changes in the census. And for Rockingham County, it's going to be October 5th at the county courthouse at 7, I believe, or 6 p.m., but I'll ask Mr. Dean to find the appropriate place to post that, because I think it's an important thing. They give very little public notice, and this year is important. Well, every year is important, but the changes in the census in some of the towns are quite dramatic, so.
Thank you. Okay, before we wrap up, any other comments or anything from the board? Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.